Welcome back, and now in our final video of our series of 3, we're going to talk about the origins of drama, both tragedy and comedy, as understood by the ancients and as we have reconstructed today. I will also speak a little bit further about comedy, again, for the purpose of this course. So most of what we know about the ancients' theories of the origin of drama come from this work by the philosopher Aristotle from the 4th and 3rd centuries BC. That means the 300s down into 200s BC. Aristotle wrote numerous philosophic works, but he also wrote a work called Poetics, having to do with his theories of the origins of tragedy and comedy, and also, in his opinion, what made for excellent drama. In the CLA397 course, I speak more about his views of drama as is pertinent to that particular subject. But here I'll speak specifically about his theories of origins, because that's what's most pertinent for this course regarding comedy. Okay, so both tragedy and comedy, that is drama in general, are connected specifically, according to Aristotle's views, with the original worship of the god Dionysus. And again, Dionysus is probably better known to you originally as the god of wine, but in the ancient world, he was also the god of theater and drama. It appears that originally there was some kind of a production done with a single actor, we'll call him just for this purpose, a single actor who was narrating the story of Dionysus, and then there was a chorus accompanying him that would give some kind of affirmation as to what was being talked about and would provide accompaniment and singing and dancing and so forth. And of course, in a real Dionysic festival, probably those accompanying dancers and singers would have been the Maenads if they were women, or the Satyrs if they were male. And so those particular worshippers of Dionysus, the very manic lunatics that they were, would have been carrying out the very ecstatic singing and dancing that would have been associated with that Dionysic worship. So, but one of the points about the telling of the story, that's where drama really gets its specific character, is that Dionysus, of course, has a rather interesting story in himself as far as what goes on with him. You may remember from mythology that Dionysus was originally conceived out of a fireball, basically, because his mother Semele, who had an illegitimate relationship with the god Zeus, insisted that Zeus show himself in his true form when Zeus promised her a boon, swearing on the river Styx, which one should never do because you can never take that oath back. And so she insisted that he get to see himself as he really is, because her sisters had told him, you know what, you might be married to some monster. You better find out exactly who this guy is. And so he showed himself as either a fireball or a lightning bolt, and pew, it burned up poor Semele alive. So then Dionysus was rescued, his embryonic form was rescued out of the ashes of his mother, and then Zeus impregnated him inside of his thigh in order to get the god born. And there's a separate story that Dionysus was also torn apart by Titans when he was older at the instrumentation of Zeus's very jealous wife Hera. And then Zeus went down to the body and managed to rescue Dionysus' heart. And again, according to that version, put the heart into his thigh, and from there was able to give birth to the god. So either way, what we get here is a thing in Greek called sparagmos, which is, it has to do with sowing, interestingly, but it means scattering. So by sowing, I mean sowing seed out in a field for planting. But it's any kind of scattering. And in this case, it means the physical dismemberment and the scattering of a body, as happens to Dionysus. So Dionysus' story, therefore, is tragic. And as a result, you have a connection between Dionysus' tragic story and its narration by that single actor, and then eventually a much fuller action-based production of various stories, such as that of mythology, that will finally turn into tragedy. And that particular theory does seem relatively credible based on other evidence, and so we're willing to accept it pretty closely. Now, it appears that there was a parallel festival that was referred to as a komos that had to do with the villages where many of these singers and dancers lived, and they could form bands. And it appears to be this kind of band of traveling singers, and again, maybe tied in with Dionysus, that appears separately to have spawned the dramatic form of comedy. And so it appears to be this connection between these original village singers and the dramatic form, again, telling a story, that gives us our word comedy. That's what that originally refers to. And so comedy is a parallel production with tragedy, but it's also related to the singing and dancing of the satyrs and Maenads and so forth in worship of Dionysus. So we have that theory for how tragedy and comedy originally came into being. Now, tragedy itself was thought by the Athenians to have been originally produced in Athens by a man named Thespis in 535 BC. That particular piece of lore from the Athenians is now doubted by scholars as probably fictitious. But it is likely that tragedy did come about somewhere in that period prior to the Persian wars that the Athenians fought with Persia in the early 5th century, the 400s BC. And then it appears that comedy probably got its start a little bit after that period, maybe around the same time that Aeschylus was writing his tragedies. And of course, as we know from the videos on Aristophanes himself, born in 450 BC, didn't actually start writing and producing comedies until the 430s and into 420s BC. And so, therefore, comedy probably had already existed for several decades before getting down finally to Aristophanes. So what you therefore have to understand to conclude here is that there is a close connection with Athenian and Greek culture in general between the dramatic form and the worship of the gods, especially Dionysus, and especially because of Dionysus' tragic outcome originally through sparagmos. The idea of tearing oneself up, becoming ecstatic, losing one's way, becoming manic and such, all of that forms part of the proper worship of Dionysus. It's one of the reasons why Dionysus is associated with madness and drunkenness and so forth, because it's in that state of madness and drunkenness that one feels the real divinity within one. And so Dionysus has that particular connection. And because, of course, this form of worship is also very direct and pointed at flaws in human nature, this also gives the Athenian audience an opportunity to basically make fun of itself. So if the Athenians are carrying out some policy, like, say, a war in the wrong way, they'll hear about it from the comic playwright. It's almost like a court jester, essentially, coming along and making fun of you, saying, you're screwing up. And because the comic playwright has this unique position, the comic playwright can also break societal norms, things that normally you're not supposed to talk about, like, for instance, physical attributes of the body, now suddenly become perfectly okay to talk about in the context of comedy. You go through that process of being very open with things in order to eventually get back into society and maybe improve society and yourself somewhat. So being able to break that glass wall, as it were, of societal norms and make points to the society about things that maybe that they're doing incorrectly. Maybe they need different leadership, for instance. All of that comes across quite strongly in with ancient comedy. I'm sure that as you go through your video day assignments and you start comparing the ancient comedies with the modern videos, the modern political satire, you will see quite a few parallels, and you'll see again how the political satirical pundit, as it were, is able to make observations about the society that he's in, including the leadership that overseeing it, that other more serious commentators would not necessarily be able to do as effectively. There's something unique about the comic performance and the comic presentation of novel ideas in that way. Okay, and so I hope you've been able to get through this 3-video series on the production of stage drama, and this sets you up now to be able to appreciate the play Clouds a lot better, and also to now go ahead and once you've completed your assignment on clouds, to then go on to complete your first video day, where you'll be comparing clouds with some modern day videos. Okay, so when we come back, we'll go on to talk about video day, and the next play we'll be reading subsequently to clouds will be WASPs. Okay, we'll see you next video.